So now that we are coming to the end of the year, it's worth reviewing an article that I actually review every year. It is a 2013 article published by the state media of China. Now, over 10 years ago, the Winwaipo publication, which is a pro-Beijing newspaper with 14 million readers, published a highly provocative article titled "The Six Wars China Must Fight in the Coming 50 Years." Now, the piece outlined an aggressive timeline for territorial conquest that China supposedly must undertake to reclaim lands it perceives as historically Chinese. Now, this is what China declared it wanted to do in the future early in Xi Jinping's tenure. It's kind of a disturbing breakdown of these so-called inevitable wars that China expects to fight. Now, the first one is obvious. It's the one we always talk about. It's the unification of Taiwan, which they wanted to complete originally by the end of next year, 2025. The article claims Taiwan is a breakaway province that must be forcibly unified with China. They brush aside the island's democratic governance and its distinct identity, but nonetheless, this is probably the geopolitical, geostrategic flashpoint in the region, and it is number one on their list of things they want to do. Now, the second inevitable war is reclaiming the South China Sea Islands, and this they want to complete by 2030, and involves asserting dominance over contested areas like the Paracel Islands, the Spratly Islands, and Scarborough Shoal. These are territories claimed by other countries such as Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and others, and they own these islands by law. China has no claim to them, but China wants them. And China's military buildup, including artificial islands and naval patrols in the area, already signaled their intentions to continue to be belligerent and eventually take those islands from those other countries. Now, number 3 is recovering southern Tibet, and they want to do this by 2040. This refers to India's Arunachal Pradesh, which China claims as South Tibet. This phase targets Indian-administered territories despite international recognition of their status as belonging to India and not China. And this is something that we've seen clashes relatively recently on. I mean, the last one took place just 2 years ago this month and led to 74 injuries. So this is still, again, a volatile area. Number 4 in the inevitable wars is China reclaiming the Diaoyutai Islands, which are pronounced Senkaku Islands in Japanese. Diaoyutai is the Chinese version. The other islands are the Ryukyu Islands, which all of these belong to Japan. And basically their proposal suggests starting a war with Japan, who is a key U.S. ally in the South China Sea, and I highly recommend they not do that, considering Japan actually is quite capable at this point. Now, number 5 is probably the least known, but possibly the easiest for them to accomplish. I'll discuss that a bit later, and that is unification with Mongolia by 2050. Now, the article suggests that China merely absorbs the independent Mongolia, ignoring the fact that it has been a sovereign country since 1921. Now, this last one, number 6, seems wild, but given Russia's reliance on China and being exposed as much weaker than we expected Russia to be, this is not so far-fetched, and that is recovering the territory seized by Russia, and the Chinese want to do this by 2060. China purportedly aims to reclaim areas ceded to Russia under historical treaties. The last time they had a skirmish over this territory was in 1969, and they have been relatively peaceful between nations since then. Nonetheless, China wants to recover the territories that Russia seized. In practice, China's actions already echo their ambitions here. Its aggressive moves in the South China Sea, including militarizing artificial islands, and its border skirmishes with India, showcase a broader pattern of territorial assertiveness. Now, the proposed timelines may be unattainable, but the expansionist mindset and disregard for international norms are clear. That being said, do I think China has the capacity to pull off this in its entirety? No, not even remotely. In order of never going to happen to maybe it could happen, I will just say taking islands from Japan is a definite no-go. Japan has a navy that ranks in the top 5 in the world and a mutual defense treaty with the US, so that's not happening. Next, I would say taking territory from India is probably not going to happen. India has the capability to defeat China in a land battle, and this fight takes China's naval edge away. After that, taking Taiwan is highly unlikely. Taiwan's powerful partners and porcupine defense strategy makes a Chinese invasion nearly impossible. The next ones in line do fall in the maybe category, though. Taking territory from Russia, a nuclear power, Well, if there's a collapse in the cards for Russia and Putin is deposed, or Russia grows to absolutely need China for its basic survival, we could see China capitalize on Russian instability. China is more powerful than Russia, and their no limits partnership exists merely to counter the US. If China senses extreme weakness from their little brother to the north, they could take action. Next in the maybe category would be annexing Mongolia. It's a relatively large country with a relatively small populace. Only 3.5 million people live there, and they concentrate in urban centers. China may have to contend with a Russia and a US that protest this move, but Russia may not be in a position to respond and support, and the US may not respond forcefully enough. Considering China is 10 times bigger than Russia and Mongolia is like 15 times smaller than Ukraine, such a move by China would not be terribly difficult. Now, in the final category of maybe China can pull it off is taking the Spratly Islands, the Paracel Islands, as well as the Scarborough Shoal. I mean, they basically have done this. The only thing stopping them is those countries that continue to push back, and the fact that the US really hasn't stood up and flatly said enough, which I don't see happening. The fact that China still is operating here shows me that the US hasn't prioritized it in a meaningful manner. That being said, China has its own demographic and economic problems that would be logarithmically compounded by war. China is set to already lose over 100 million people by 2050 to old age. An additional 400 million will be older than 65 by 2050. So again, war would make those numbers far worse. Nonetheless, this state-sponsored article is a chilling reminder of Beijing's vision for the future, a world where sovereignty and international law bend to China's will. Understanding and countering these ambitions is crucial to maintaining global stability, and recalling historical documents such as this one, which point to their ambitions, is also critical. We have to read the history and understand where China wants to go in the future.